In the United States, President Biden has called for calm after 5 police officers were charged with the murder of Tyre Nichols, a black man severely beaten after a traffic stop earlier this month. The officers in Memphis, Tennessee, who are all black, were fired last week after being accused of using excessive force. Their actions were caught on body cameras. That video will be released in the next 24 hours. Our correspondent Peter Bowes has more on the developments.
Another case of alleged police brutality in America, this time in Memphis, where 29-year-old Tyre Nichols died 3 days after he was stopped for alleged reckless driving. His family say he was severely beaten. The 5 officers were sacked last week after an investigation found them to be directly responsible for the physical abuse of Mr. Nichols. Now they've been charged with second-degree murder.
This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual. This incident was heinous, reckless, and inhumane.
Video footage of the arrest will be made public in the coming hours. Tyre Nichols' grieving family had an opportunity to review it earlier this week.
I don't know anything right now. All I know is my son, Tyre, is not here with me anymore. He will never walk through that door again. He would never come in and say, "Hello, parents," because that's what he would do. He would come in and say, "Hello, parents."
In a word, it's absolutely appalling. Let me be clear. What happened here does not at all reflect proper policing. This was wrong. This was criminal.
This is a case involving a young black man and police officers who are also black. It is, according to the civil rights leader, the Reverend Al Sharpton, particularly painful because of the race of the officers.
So for this young man to be beaten to death by 5 police is horrendous, inexcusable, and intolerable. But even adding to that is more injurious to me and others that these are 5 black cops. We fought to put blacks on the police force. And for them to act in such a brutal way is more egregious than I could tell you.
In a statement, President Biden said Tyre's family deserved a swift, full and transparent investigation into his death. He went on, "I join Tyre's family in calling for peaceful protest. Outrage is understandable, but violence is never acceptable." Tyre's death is a painful reminder that we must do more to ensure that our criminal justice system lives up to the promise of fair and impartial justice, equal treatment and dignity for all. With the imminent release of the video footage, officials in Memphis have called for calm, but they're not discouraging people from taking to the streets. The days ahead will be tense. Emotions are running high, with many Americans asking, why does this keep happening? Peter Bowes, BBC News.
Now, Jody Armour is Professor of Law at the University of Southern California. He's written a book about America's criminal justice system in which he argues it is among the deadliest and racist in the world. Earlier I asked him if there are any signs of progress since Rodney King and George Floyd.
Yeah, we have made progress in having more Americans recognize that there is a problem. You know, the George Floyd protests here in LA, it was 6 weeks, every day, tens of thousands of people in the street. Raised the awareness of a lot of Americans that this is a serious problem. Of course, there was a backlash, the Stop Woke Act in Florida and that kind of thing. But there are more and more voters who recognize this as a serious problem. And you see prosecutors, progressive prosecutors, places like Los Angeles and Philadelphia and all over the country being elected on a non-carceral platform. So there is some progress, but there's still a long way to go.
Now, you work at a pretty interesting intersection between law, politics, psychology, even the arts. It's a sort of pretty unique cross-disciplinary take on race and the role it plays in the criminal justice system. What solutions do you think this particular perspective offers?
Well, what we're finding is just trying to implicit bias train people out of their bigotry, their unconscious biases, even if they don't have any conscious bigotry, isn't really possible. So what we're going to have to do is minimize the contacts. between police and members of marginalized communities. They should not be in traffic stops. This was a case of a traffic stop. Why do we have police in America making all these traffic stops? It's unnecessary, getting involved in houselessness policy, getting involved in drug interdiction and that sort of thing. We don't need police. They reduce their footprints, and then have the arts help us to humanize both the police but especially the people who the police are pulling over. You have to look at this young man not as fully human to beat him as savagely as they beat him over a 3-minute period. So we need the arts to help us humanize all of us.
But how is it possible to limit contact between the police and marginalised communities? How is that possible?
For example, take them out of traffic stops altogether. There have been communities in the U.S. that have taken police out of traffic stops and have not seen either traffic fatalities go up or crime go up. So we don't need them doing stop and frisk on wheels in the first place, right? And that is where you see a lot of the fraught interactions between police and motorists, because police are walking up to the cars nervous, thinking the motorist might have a gun. And so it's already a tense interaction that you don't even need. So there are those kinds of interventions that we can make that minimize the contact between police and members of minority communities.
Now, your family has a particular and long-standing relationship, doesn't it, with the criminal justice system? Just take us through that, if you will, and how that has informed where you are and the place from which you speak.
Yeah, well, I dedicate this space that I'm in to the memory of my dad, who was given 22 to 55 years for possession and sale of marijuana when I was 8 years old. And he taught himself the law in prison and represented himself pro se, and eventually appealed his way out of prison using the legal lexicon as his, instrument of self-liberation. And it drove home to me the wonders of the law, right? That his case stands for the proposition that the prosecution cannot deliberately lie to a jury to get a conviction against a defendant. Before his case established that proposition, it was not recognized in American law. So he really drove home to me the importance of taking language seriously, the legal lexicon seriously, and even rolling judo-wise with the momentum of the law, with its own melody. And he used to say, I made the frozen circumstances dance by playing to them their own melody.